Hello, everybody. Happy Friday. Welcome to Roundtable, coming to you live from Beijing. I'm your host, He Yang, joined by Neela and Lai Ming. Good as always to have you, our dear listeners, with us. We have some fascinating topics for discussion today and every day. On today's program, the so-called audio economy is heating up. What do we mean by it? And, well, let's find out if you're a consumer or possibly a content provider. Also on the menu, researchers claim that men are funnier than women. Do you agree? You can find us on Apple Podcast at Roundtable China. If you have a second and you're so inclined, please give us lots of stars and a review. It will help other folks to find the show. But first, on today's Roundtable, the advent of the internet gave users access to a wealth of information, content, and later services. And it was expected to be all free. Until recent years, a new generation of digital natives has shown through consumption behavior that they are paying for online content, and audio products are becoming the new digital consumption darling as sales figures continue to go up. So we'll take a look at this audio industry and what do we know about the things people are willing to pay for as they take a listen?
Very, very interesting. Some figures here. Latest data from China Internet Network Information Center, CNIC, revealed that there had been 232 million audiobook users in China by last June, taking up 28.9% of the total number of netizens. And instead of reading books, users can listen to hosts reading books for you online. So, they're saving their eyesight, probably. It has become a lifestyle because, one, users can listen to various kinds of content. Two, the cost is low, sometimes free. Three, a strong interaction with users. Well, that's if you were listening on platforms such as Himalaya and Lizhi. Although on Apple Podcasts, there's a minimum number of interaction with the users and also between users and content providers. And number four, it's okay to listen to the content wherever you are, even when you're on the move. Today, on my way to work, I listened to a podcast provided by the New York Times, and then followed by one that's made by the Atlantic magazine. So even when you're on the move, as long as you have a smart device, you can listen to audio content. And sometimes, if you want to save data. Obviously, we're entering the age of 5G. Data shouldn't be a problem, but if you're still as stingy as I am, you can download it on your smart device and costs you nothing. And what's interesting about the sales figure, the number of users of online paid knowledge content was 93 million in 2016. The figure gradually rose to 292 million in 2018 and is estimated to grow to 387 million in 2017. We can see the speed has slowed down somewhat, but still it is increasing. So, yeah, I suppose what's interesting about audio content is that it actually has been in existence for a long time. I think people in our business know very well that what we do every day is associated with audio, radio, with what we do here. And also, many years ago, even when I was still in college, some former classmates of mine, they were listening to some content that they download from a platform that's called 静雅思听. It's in Chinese. Mostly there are people who will read literature or something on that platform, and you can download sometimes a book. And then in recent years, they've introduced this payment method where you have to buy to be able to listen to that content. And some new platforms such as Himalaya and Lizhi, they were relatively new, but you can see that they have taken some kind of a stage of development. I mean, back in the years when I was doing movie reviews, I was sort of deeply associated with Lizhi and Himalaya. I was getting several tens of thousands of listeners on these platforms. But you can see, as an experienced guy who's dealt with them, you can see that there were some kind of tricks that they played in order to attract listeners to these platforms. For instance, if my movie review content was recommended to the front page, I get this and that many views or listens every day. If I somehow wasn't recommended to the front page, but to a secondary page, I get this and that amount of listens every day. So there were some kind of falsified information about the number of plays that you get. There were many tricks that they were playing in order to attract listeners and also to encourage content providers who will gather on their platforms. So it's very interesting, a very interesting experience to see these platforms, at least in China, how they develop.
Very interesting as these things evolve in front of our very eyes. It only took the last 5 years to see sort of this industry to start from sort of a niche thing.
Startups.
Yeah, as it explodes into something very mainstream and apparently part of people's daily lives. And I think that is one aspect of the audio industry that I find to be very unique, that there is that sort of intimacy that is immediately established once you once this product reaches the smartphone or whatever portable device that the listener owns. So when we talk about this audio industry, what was your initial thoughts? Well, I guess what Lai Ming's mostly been talking about has been the Chinese situation, but from your own observation internationally, Neela.
Yeah, I mean, technically, I think globally, traditionally we were used to sort of like the mainstream media, the traditional media like TV, radio, etc., was the people we viewed as our gatekeepers to distribute information for us to maybe to get entertained, to educate ourselves, to be informed, etc. But all that has changed, like you said, especially in the last 5 years, where we've seen the growth of streaming and the growth of people who are embracing or adopting the audio streaming and buying content online, and also not forgetting that now everything is connected. People are driving cars and they are connected on the internet, and you have your phone connected on the internet, so you can actually all these things are portable, which means you can listen to anything, anytime, anywhere you want. And also, it's when you look at because it's a distribution channel that's really growing really, really fast, we don't have to depend on like getting home and listening to news or getting home and listening to your favorite program, etc., etc. You can just plug in your earphones, your portable earphones, and plug in your device, and you listen to whatever thing you want. And also, people these days have a lot of access to production facilities. These days you can even use your phone to record information. So you have a lot of people now have access to all sorts of people. We don't necessarily depend on traditional media to get information. And this is like something that's really, really worrying a lot of people, especially in television and radio these days, because things like podcasts are now beating radio.
Yeah, and here is the interesting bit as we are sort of touching the pulse of the change here. That is, who are the content providers who are creating this ocean of podcasts that's available out there for everybody to listen to wherever and whenever?
Well, there are publishers and online literature platforms, and there are audio production organizations, traditional radio stations like us. We Media, that's basically everybody. If you were a user on Himalaya or Lizhi in China, and then you can subscribe for an account and then upload your own stuff. The application in itself allows you to record whatever you want, and you can upload your file there, and you can be a content provider. And then there are also institutions like universities. I know that my wife listens to a podcast, or more like an audio content on Himalaya, and it's done by a associate professor Tianyi Miao from Shanghai Conservatory of Music. She certainly is a professional in the study of classical music, and she did an amazing series of audio content telling people how to appreciate classical music, because here in China, not a lot of people have gone through that kind of training in order to appreciate and understand what the musicians and composers born 100 years or hundreds of years ago, what they were thinking and what was behind their motive and that kind of thing. So it was immensely popular here in China on Himalaya. So all kinds of people do all kinds of content on all kinds of platforms, and obviously there are some kind of variations, but in general it is freer. It's a freer platform than, let's say, the traditional radio and television, in the sense that you can always hook up and anybody can produce it.
Yeah, and there's another thing that I realize is a little bit more of a freedom that one enjoys if you're providing and producing this product on the internet. That is, there are no commercial breaks.
Yeah.
No time limit. It's not like you gotta finish this bit right before, oh my goodness, in a matter of 5 seconds, and then there's none of that.
You can press the press button at any time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you can just, record as many times as you want, wherever you want, add special effects and all kinds of things you can do. So in that sense, I think you can be a lot more artistic and freer to express and come up with your own stuff. So that's all really fun and interesting. But how are these folks making profit? There are, I think the traditional model has really been broken down in many ways. But what about this new type of audio content consumption? How is the money made?
Well, data from market consultancy II Media Research show that the audiobook market experienced rapid growth, reaching 3.24 billion yuan or $455.5 million in 2017. In market size, streaming platforms like Himalaya and iGet began to tap the paid content business, leveraging their host reputation to charge a fee for their content. So here's one way where they get money. So that is they sell some of the IPR content that they have on their platforms. People, whoever that are interested can spend the money either on a monthly basis for membership or on a case-by-case basis for an individual piece of content. That's one way to do it, and that's actually the progress that we are seeing in recent years. Because before this, this mature market is even beginning to take shape, at the very beginning of Himalaya and Lizhi, these kind of platforms, they were struggling to make ends meet. I imagine they're still struggling to make ends meet, but the case was even more so at the very beginning of it. They were, on the one hand, they were trying to attract listeners to their platforms. On the other hand, they are also spending a lot of money buying IPR content from traditional media or people who read, or professionals who read books, or here in China, sketches, is it? 相声 or 小品. So a lot of contents that have to spend on buying them. Instead, they were having a little trouble making ends meet at the very beginning of it.
Well, is the business model a little bit more lucrative now, or are we kind of also just being overly optimistic about this situation?
I have to say I don't have a very detailed figures on exactly how profitable they are, but based on my personal observation, I can see that they are having. Well, this is a better time than when they were starting, in the sense that at the beginning, because they didn't have a lot of users on their platforms, they didn't have a lot of listeners, they didn't have a lot of content providers, and therefore they didn't have a lot of traffic. So the only way they could make money was to sell advertisement. Mm-hmm. And because they didn't have a lot of traffic on their platforms, they were struggling to attract sponsors. Mm-hmm. And nowadays, with the Chinese government being so hard on enforcing its copyright protection measures, also a younger generation of internet users have sort of grown used to spending money for anything that they see online. So I can see that they are having a better time making money than they were used to.
Well, Neela, what do you see as this situation? Do you see like a change in people's perception towards spending or, going for the free ride on the internet when it comes to these products?
Well, I don't really think that this perception per se. It's more about the value people attach to something. For example, if I'm listening to a podcast and God forbid I see this might start happening in the future where you're going to start seeing advertisements plugged into an audio you're listening to, and then that will prompt me out of necessity, because I don't need this disruption with advertisement. It's going to prompt me as somebody who's a fan or a listener or whatever you call it, to subscribe even further, to pay for a package that will get rid of these advertisements. The same thing we do when it comes to videos. There is a time where you used to watch like videos on YouTube or Youku, and you could watch a movie ad free, and then at some point, because a lot of people are seeing a lot of free stuff, then the advertisers started saying this as an opportunity for them to plug in their advertisements, and then now you have to subscribe to pay more to get rid of those. So I think this is going to happen because now we are seeing a lot of advertisers also looking at this as a place they could also spend some money, because they want to catch the attention of these people who are migrating from traditional media and onto these platforms.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. Also, I think it is one of the differences that I've spotted between, let's say, podcasts in China as opposed to the English-speaking world, because I am an avid listener of Apple Podcasts, and you can find Roundtable China there, as that's our show, and yes, and I would like to, check out what other people are doing out there, just to keep in touch with, I suppose, the peers in the industry in a way. And I realized that the profit model that has been adopted by the international podcasts has been
the professionals.
Well, it is brands that have found the most popular podcast that's fitting to the temperament and brand image of this particular company, and then they do product placement. And they also sometimes put in a audio advert, or they get the host,
the presenter
of this podcast to read out these words to endorse this brand or a particular product. And sometimes it's done cleverly. It fits the podcast's temperament too, but sometimes it's a little strange, doesn't fit as well. But that seems to be the main way to earn revenue. And in China, it's very different, because I think most of the listeners and those who are consuming this product share a similar view as Neela, what you just mentioned, that we don't like listening to those ads in the podcast.
No.
Therefore, you sometimes see the pop-up ads in the podcast app. Sometimes it's like that, or there is okay, basically it is not the plug-in content that is so obvious, and I think that is the main difference, because often the money is made by subscriptions towards this 50 episodes of reading the Dreams of the Red Mansion for you, or another 20 episodes of deciphering what are the hidden messages of the Dreams of the Red Mansion, that kind of thing. And you get a top-notch scholar who's also really popular among the young, or something like that. Or how can you make your first 1 million yuan before the age of 30, and what is the next stock to chase after, or how can you land the next amazing date, and 10 episodes, pay up for the course. So this is the subscription or pay up for the course. These are the revenue models.
Yeah, and you have no choice, because if it's a tutorial you're following, and like you said, if you've got this content you're really hooked on, and it's telling you, okay, the first episode you listen to it, it's free, and then they tell you, like, if you need to listen to the next 9 episodes, you've got to subscribe, pay $100 or 100 something, because you really, really want to listen to this content and finish what you started. And they make sure that the first episode you're listening to is really hooks you on. So you have no choice but to pay for the rest, because you cannot just say you'll just be, because otherwise you will never get over it.
Well, that's an amazing sales strategy to get you hooked up for free at the beginning of it, and then
and
charge
actually
you some money in order
this
to
really
keep going
annoys
on.
me, to say the least.
Yeah, it is. And I am someone who's paid up, and I am not alone, apparently. According to the media research that was just cited in 2017, where I think the data that it's gathered, apparently over 60% of users would pay for the programs that they like. This is looking at the Chinese consumer base, and over 40% said that they paid to learn knowledge. So it's mainly that they want to take a lesson through audio form. And that's really interesting, because there's also another discussion that's been sort of a backlash towards audio economy. That is, it is feeding on people's anxiety today, and it's not helping you. But through paying out, your feeling of vacuum and anxiety actually grows. So do you think that, this is kind of preying on the weak spot of people?
Do you mean money is the kind of sacrificial animal that some people put on the pedestal to show that we have pleaded the god or the deity? I've spent time, I've spent money, so that I should have a very good fortune in the future, that kind of thing. Obviously, some people do that, and they do that somewhat to alleviate the anxiety, but apparently not everybody is so naive. Apparently, if you look at the demographics of people who pay for these contents on these platforms, most users have received higher education. 59.6% of them have a bachelor's degree. Their possibility to spend for knowledge and spiritual material is relatively higher. Is good for the platforms to future develop the paid content business. I think that's very interesting, because whoever has gotten a bachelor's degree, they must have had a very good sense of discipline. They must have developed a relatively better learning habit, and therefore they are more likely to spend their whole life learning and studying something. And to see them make up the largest portion of users on these platforms, that's just good news for these platforms.
And also good news for those who are churning out content. And we're churning out content too, and we do it painstakingly. You don't see all the hard work we put in right before the show and afterwards, but certainly it is it's a lot of heart that you got to pour in if you want to churn out something good. And so if you look at the figures, I think 2017 and part of 2018 were the booming years of the audio economy in China, as subscription and usership figures continue to rise. And now in 2019, just judging by the buzz it's attracted, it's kind of plateaued a little bit. Do you think that this is going to be a temporary thing, or are there some big challenges that needs to be solved for this part of the industry to really grow?
Well, obviously, audio is not as intuitive as another format, that is vision. Obviously, people's primary source of information would be their eyes, and that's more intuitive, that's more convenient. And audio, despite its convenience, despite its cost of data and money, is going to come secondhand to video content. And also, I think it takes some kind of getting used to absorb knowledge and information from audio content. I remember as an English major, I had to listen to all kinds of listening materials in order to improve our listening ability of English language. At the very beginning, I had difficult time keeping track of what's being played on the MP3 player. And just like what people of my age would have trouble starting to write on a computer rather than on a book. or on a pamphlet, that kind of thing. So it takes some kind of getting used to in order to stay focused and get information from audio content. And considering how people are using audio content, most likely they are driving or they're doing house cleaning, that kind of thing. They are not necessarily paying a lot of attention to what they're listening. So in that sense, I believe that maybe the whole thing about audio content, paid audio content, might have a long way to go before they... I wouldn't say they can replace any other platforms. They wouldn't be able to replace other platforms, but they would have to go a long way in order to hold on to their own spot.
Yeah, well, I just want to thank you for inviting us into your own little personal space, whether it's in a car right now or at home or keeping you company as you are commuting. And we will be back after this break. Stay with us.
Informed opinion and heated debate. Find out what's got China talking and join us for your roundtable discussion.
You're listening to Roundtable with myself, He Yang, joined by Lai Ming and Nila. Coming up, researchers claim that men are funnier than women. Well, that's kind of confirming a stereotype.
Are there male researchers?
Are there any female researchers or participants at all? Well, do you agree that guys are simply funnier than girls? And Roundtable's Happy Place coming your way. That's when we share what's made us happy this week. You can find us on Apple Podcast at Roundtable China and our two apps. That's the 轻松调频 app and China Plus app. And now on Roundtable, as we continue our discussion, researchers found that 63% of men were funnier than the average woman. They looked at the results of various studies in which people were asked to rate men and women's humor without knowing their gender first. So let's take a look at this. How is the study conducted, and who are the sampling pool that we're looking at?
Well, researchers from Aberystwyth University and the University of North Carolina analyzed 28 studies which look at how funny around 5,000 people were. They wanted to see whether the stereotypes that men are funnier than women was true. And also, lead researcher Dr. Gil Greengrass said in the Psychology Today, this stereotype is shared by both men and women, but of course, just because it exists doesn't mean it is true. And so they went to find out about it. In many of the studies they look at, men and women were asked to write a funny caption to accompany a cartoon, and then independent judges rated their funniness without knowing their gender. And according to Dr. Gill, the result found that to the best of our knowledge, on average, men appear to have higher humor production ability than men.
It was also interesting, was just a side note, that apparently what people associated as unfunny, they thought it would be written by a woman. And if it was funny, then it's got to be written by a guy. So, there's definitely stereotypes that sort of just runs deep through every corner of this the study. But still, Nila, what do you think? Do you agree with the finding?
I feel offended as a woman.
Oh.
Let's just start there. Like, just because somebody was sitting in a little corner and wondering, I wonder who's funny, it didn't mean that they should have gone out there and wasted resources to research who's funnier. Because at the end of the day, sometimes, funny or something that's funny is relative. What's one person finds funny another person might not find it funny. So anyway, but at the end of the day, when you really look at this study, it actually makes you wonder. It made me think, like, all the comedians I follow and all the comedians that are my favorite made me question and see, do I have a female comedian that I think that is funny? And actually, no.
You know? I have a few, actually.
No. So that subconsciously, I must think that men are funnier. Come to think about it, yeah, because I've watched a few female comedians, and in most cases I don't really find them funny. But that's because they're comedians, not as individuals as females. I just do not find their material funny.
But do you find like average everyday, if we look at men and women, is your general like knee-jerk reaction that guys are just funnier than women as well?
It's never really crossed my mind. I mean, it's like asking a parent, so between all your children, who's the most handsome and who's the ugliest? You know, if you're a parent who's like, no parent sits down and thinks about that, like who's better looking and who's not looking.
But if you have more than one kid, I bet you're thinking about that.
I don't think you'll be thinking about that. You'll be thinking who's cleverer than the other, who's got better talent than the other.
Who's got the highest earning potential in the future in 10 years' time.
Yeah. That's realistic stuff. But nobody sits down and starts thinking, I wonder who's much prettier. Of all my daughters, which one is much prettier? You know, it's a bit awkward in a way. So I equate this study to that.
Okay, fair enough. And that's interesting because you point at a aspect of the study that is,
it's cringeworthy.
It is.
Yeah.
You get like squirmish about it. But let's, squirm our way through the last 10 minutes, okay? So basically, this study only looks at normal people, just, in real life. So not celebrity comedians.
Yeah.
So not the professionals, but us,
average Joes.
Real people. Okay,
Yeah.
let's put it this way. Real people.
Yeah.
And, we can devote part of the discussion about the comedians in a second because that's fascinating. But for real people, Lai Ming.
Yes?
Do you think that, maybe guys being funny is more of a little bit of a requirement to get you ahead in dating and, establishing yourself as opposed to maybe women in that regard?
Well, I suppose before I started dating, I was curious about what kind of man that girls would be interested in, and apparently,
what were your findings, Lai Ming?
In many of the blogs, the girls were explicit about what they're looking for. Obviously, they want somebody that's humorous.
Someone that makes them laugh.
Yeah, someone that makes them happy, that kind of thing. And apparently, there are some people who would associate humor to a higher intelligence. And suppose maybe that's something that girls are looking for. I don't know.
So did you... I know Lai Ming is a hardworking guy, very intelligent as well, and he's very likable in the eyes of some, okay? And so, Lai Ming, did you feel like it's better as a guy to maybe sharpen your skills in the humor department? And did you feel that was something, as you're growing up as a male, that was present in your psychology?
If I ever felt it, I must have felt it in a subconscious way, because I normally don't make a deliberate effort to be funny or be funnier than I am. I like Carl Benjamin said, I have a dry sense of humor. Might have not everybody gets it, and I'm happy that my wife gets it.
Yeah.
And
lucky
that's
you.
just it. And I also understand that being funny, being funnier, or being humorous can be a rather subjective kind of experience. Not everybody can find it humorous. And also, very interestingly, here in China, there's a very interesting story about how things can be better accepted if they are stupid and easier to handle. I think a lot of Chinese people are familiar with the term 下里巴人 and 阳春白雪. So it refers to a story where an artist or a musician or a singer started singing a pop song, 下里巴人, and at that moment everybody in the city was able to follow. And then progressively the singer started to sing something that's more difficult, more challenging, and then only a few dozen of people in the city could follow. So that's an age-old metaphor to show that maybe if you want to be popular, you have to be easy. You have to be you have to be easy. You have to reach out to the common folks.
And also, I think that generally now, just while you were talking, I was thinking and looking back and, bringing this picture, me hanging out with my girl friends while I'm hanging out with the male friends. And to be fair, I feel like the kind of sense of humor I prefer is the male type. Like, I feel like I laugh a lot when I'm with the male counterparts than when I'm with female. And one thing perhaps it's got to do with the way women tell jokes, for example, women tend to be a little bit considerate to the other person's emotions. Well, when it's about men, a man can say anything, and men, it's very hard for them to be offended. So at the end of the day, they tend to come up with like even better jokes as they hang out. While women, we are so conservative in the way we tell our jokes because we're wondering, will this offend somebody if I say something?
But don't you think that's hugely unfair? And that is when we are pre-programmed to be like that. Because guys, they can throw their stuff around.
No, I just think women need to just be a little bit hardcore, a little bit.
But the space is available for them. They're entitled to it. But for women, if you want to throw your stuff around, different stuff, but then you gotta earn that space, because otherwise you're offending someone. Do I look bad if I'm saying this? Am I crossing an invisible line? And for women, you gotta break through that.
Yeah.
And then it's breaking through that, which takes effort and courage and other people's acceptance, which makes us stay confined within that invisible line. And as you grow up in a patriarchal society as a woman, every day you're being programmed to believe in that. And then, boom, today they're saying, you girls aren't funny. And you know what? For guys, if they're funny, that's like a big thing that makes them attractive and charismatic. And I've even seen, I'm not going to name names, but guys that have written their jokes in a little book. I mean, hats off to you for being so hardworking and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But, I mean, if you have to write it in a notebook and the way you present it might not be funny. But anyhow, there's that thought and there's that drive that if you're funny, then you would possibly make up for the looks or the balding head or the fat tummy or whatever it is. Then it will make you more attractive when you're dating, when you're mating, that kind of thing. But for women, God forbid if she tells a joke, she better laughs along with the joke. That's what makes her attractive. And if she doesn't have the face, if she doesn't have the hot figure, and she's only funny, then she's a laughingstock. And this is just what I'm painting as possibly a picture of what happens around.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's how society has pre-programmed us, like you said. And so a lot of men grow up, learning how to tell banter and how to joke. And because also it's not just because they want to please their fellow women. Men are also very competitive amongst themselves, you know. The alpha male comes out when you're hanging out with your mate and a beautiful girl walks past. You want to be the funniest of the pack. So in that case, it becomes a little bit more competitive in that it forces men to keep practicing on their banter, to keep practicing on the jokes they tell. And the more you practice, like they say, the better you become. Whereas women, we've just been pushed in this corner and confined there, like you said. And so we just don't bother. So all we tend to look for is somebody who can make us laugh. And men want a woman who will laugh at their jokes.
Mm-hmm. And if she's telling a joke and she's funnier than you are, well, there's no second date. So
yeah, that's very true. That's very true. I mean, I've been on dates with a guy who could not take a joke or could not tell a joke. And honestly, it's a buzz killer.
Oh, really?
It's a buzz killer.
But let's be reasonable. Is being funny really the only thing that you might want to expect from a man? Because really,
no. It's not about that. It's more about when you feel like you can laugh at somebody's jokes, it makes you feel relaxed to be yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're just sitting there and you're uptight, it makes me feel like you're if I said anything. Or if you said something and they laughed at it, then you will feel like, what are you laughing at?
Oh.
That other person might become defensive. So in that case, you don't really feel comfortable because if they cannot tell jokes or understand or have any sense of humor, what am I doing?
Well, here's another interesting point, though. I think that sometimes men are goofier and some, if not more childish than women. And I wonder what that has to do with what He Yang mentioned earlier. about the space that society has given to different gender, in the sense that maybe women are supposed to be more mature, more caring, and more considerate, whereas men are awarded more liberty in the sense that they can be a little childish, they can be a little vulgar, they can be a little goofy when they're talking and when they're trying to be funny. And I'm wondering about that because that's in relation to our earlier story about 下里巴人 and 阳春白雪. Because honestly, some of the jokes that a lot of the men were talking as I grew up that I listened to, I couldn't stand them. I mean, why are you talking so vulgar? Why are you making fun of people like that? Why are you so hardcore? And why are you so cruel?
Yeah, I do agree with that, and it's unfortunately that's really, it makes me sad when you see like a man can be allowed to be vulgar and be found extremely funny, but when a woman uses the same language, even the same words, they will be considered as, oh, she's got a dirty mouth.
Yeah.
You know?
And that's the part I think we're possibly entering the comedian realm a little bit more. And so, okay, let's now turn the page and look at the comedians. And it's so fascinating, Neela, when right before the show, even yesterday when we sort of touch base on the topics, and like both of us, we disagree on with the study.
The study,
yeah. But in the comedian world, you can't find any female comedian that you particularly like, right?
No, but I mean, I do have a few names, but only when I see maybe they are in a movie or
so they're
a sitcom. But when they do a stand-up comedy, I don't find them funny.
Well, I suppose you're also very honest, and I appreciate that very much. And for me, I actually have a few female comedians that I do enjoy their work, and when I look into how they present themselves and everything, a lot of the times I feel they're certainly courageous.
Ali Wong.
Because Ali Wong is
one.
And even well, you probably know the names Ellen DeGeneres, and also
now I
Who
like
doesn't love
Ellen.
Ellen?
I like Ellen. Oh, she had slipped my mind.
Yeah,
I like
Ellen.
Ellen DeGeneres. Yeah,
and
I like Tina Fey too, but Tina Fey is the one that I cannot stand her when she's doing stand-up comedy. I'm just happy for her to be in a sitcom or a movie or Saturday Night Live, things like that.
Okay, so I suppose in the Chinese-speaking world, two names come into my mind. One would be Xiao S, Xu Xidi. So she's the only example I can think of that is hugely attractive. She's like sexually appealing in the eyes of men and women, and she's funny. So, but the other...
Is she funny because she's beautiful?
She's really funny. See, again, this part is sexist. She's so funny, but she's so pretty at the same time. See, you would never say that about a guy. And actually,
yeah, that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, exactly. But she has both, and that's why maybe she's appealing to both genders. That's one example. And the other female comedians in the Chinese-speaking world, I can only think of Jia Ling, who I have... who I find to be very, I think she's more sweet than funny in a way, because for her, I feel quite, in a way, sad. The fact
she doesn't need that sympathy.
She doesn't need. She's hugely successful. Okay, let's put this front and forward. But it's almost like she had to erase all her female features to exist as a comedian.
Right. So it's all about how she looks physically.
No, she's not a... It's almost like the underlying message is she's not a pretty woman.
Yeah.
So her humor is expressed at the expense of that. And I feel as a woman, I know all of us want to look attractive, at least to ourselves, okay? And then it's almost like she's given up on that to be funny, to survive in that industry. And she's said in previous interviews that she's a little on the rounder side, and she said she can't go on a diet because she knows that if she is slim, then she loses her trademark.
Yeah.
And she's not like the almost like a punching bag sometimes in some of those sketches, which I do not appreciate at all. So there's also,
so it's a lot of self-deprecating kind of humor.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, there's a rising comedic or talk show actress in the form of Suwen. I think she was in the latest talk show. Was it a competition? 脱口秀大会. I think she tells some very intelligent jokes. She's not exactly the most sexy person I've seen on TV or in real life.
Hey,
But
maybe
I think-
another
but I
person
think-
might find
but
her sexy.
I think her intelligence makes her quite sexy in her own way.
Well, and you heard that from a man. Bravo. So I think it's important to
Yeah.
see these role models out there, because if you don't even see them, then how do little girls even know when you're, well, this is possibly not something that you want to do for a job, but how could you even know that this is something that you can do and this is something that is possible to achieve, and you don't be valued less because of it? So absolutely important. We can win by the numbers. Just one more is better than the other way around, kind of thing.
We did talk on the show about how girls tend to take inspiration from the female models rather than their male counterparts. There have been research showing that when girls are exposed to or in connection or in association with women who are innovative, then they are more likely to grow up innovative. I think at least in the case of the United States of America, I think maybe in the sense of comedian or being funny, maybe that is the same case. We might want to change or challenge the social stereotype a little bit and have more funny and interesting female comedians in the society and in public, so that our women can be funny and sexy at the same time.
Bravo. And Liming, well said. So
You just summarized everything I was actually thinking, because I think the problem here is it's not that women are not funny. It's just we don't see enough women coming out and taking the stage. So we tend to be overexposed to the male person, such that when a female comes along, you're like, oh no, you know. So we've already prejudge this person before they can even open their mouth, and I am very guilty of that.
well, I mean, admitting it is the first step, and talking about it is the second step, and the third step, let's see some change. You're listening to Roundtable. Coming up next, Roundtable's Happy Place.
Delivery.
What is it?
Happiness from Round Table.
This is the Roundtable segment when we share what's made us happy this week or in life. Okay, let's build this up. Neela, why don't you go first?
Why don't we start with Liming? He's got the best happy place.
Well, none of us can top that, you know. But okay, let's give Liming the floor.
Well, this is the first week since I came back from a paternity leave. When on top of the 7-day leave, also away from work, that made me very happy.
Isn't it 15 days?
15 days.
Yeah.
I also happened to have a son.
Whoa!
Oh, congratulations!
He was born on a Sunday a few weeks ago, and now he's less than 20 days old. And he's picked up some weight. 1
You
kilograms.
overfeeding him?
Kind of. That's kind of the kind of love that we're giving him. I was with my wife the whole time in the operation room, so it was kind of like a roller coaster, followed by a 20-day roller coaster, and one that might end up in a decades-long marathon of raising the kid and seeing him brave the future as we gradually grow old, that kind of thing. Over the past 20 days, I've thought so much about it, about my son, and also the weight of him being held in my arms is very. It feels very heavy. It feels fulfilling, and also I'm grateful for my wife. I was with him the whole time. I was with her the whole time. more than 50 hours of contraction. That was excruciating, and then she made it through. And then our son is very healthy, and growing up quite naughty actually, very very robust and very very noisy sometimes.
Do you think he looks like you?
Sadly, he looked very much like me the day he was born, and then gradually he's turning on his mother's side.
Yeah.
Now he looks very much like my father-in-law.
So the little baby's looks change every day.
Yeah.
He changes every day.
Very, very adorable little baby.
I know, but I'm still curious. How does it feel when you hold another human being that you helped create, and this other person that has a little part of you in there?
Well, we did talk about cute aggression on our show, so part of me wants to squeeze him. And also, part of me is very angry when he refuses to eat. I mean, we bottle feed him because he was sort of choking on his own, choking on the water when he was born. So he was kept on watch at the pediatrics for 4 hours before he had a chance to suck on his mother's breast. So he's having a little problem eating. And I just keep getting so angry about him refusing to eat. Even though
be patient, maybe he doesn't want to gain weight, you know.
He's gained 1 kilograms.
He's already, you know, wondering about. Yesterday we were talking about being healthy and not overeating. He's probably just wondering about that. This is fantastic news.
Well, eating is just the beginning of the problem. I imagine in the coming years, in the coming decades, I'm going to have a lot more problem. But that's the kind of life that my wife and I have decided to have, and we're happy that we made that decision, and we're happy that he's here safely, and also we're happy that we can provide for him to the best of our ability at the moment.
Oh, Lai Ming, he's such a good man. And also, this is so weird saying all of this in front of the guy. You know, I usually sing the praises behind the guy. So that's a true friend, as you know. And only stab him when he's in front of me, okay? Like, metaphorically speaking. But certainly, like, Lai Ming and his wife, they're people that who are ready and prepared and know what they're doing, and then they make decisions and make it happen, and then plan meticulously. I mean, it's almost like a female version of Lai Ming that Lai Ming's found, and congratulations to that, really. So it's really such great news that's that's dawned upon us. And also, can we say, Lai Ming, that your little boy is Roundtable's second generation?
Of course.
Yeah.
Whoa! And that is certainly something that I find to be very happy too. And yeah, let's just make it all about Lai Ming and Lai Ming's son. Yeah, because Lai Ming's really changed quite a bit. Oh, now we're getting...
have I?
No, I can see
here.
you haven't been sleeping enough, but that's because, you know, out of love you have to stay awake.
Actually, I'm sleeping better than my wife because
Really?
I only hear the baby crying in the middle of the night, and I wake up and she's crying, and then I fall asleep. For my
And
wife,
you just ignore it and go back to sleep.
yeah, because we had a nanny to take care of him for the moment, and then I like to postpone my anxiety until I actually have to deal with it, and that's 2 weeks from now.
Yeah, and Lai Ming, we do not have a camera. We will not set it up in your bedroom, but certainly you
I'll
need
set it up. You can see it.
help out, and I'm sure you will, with the missus and with the baby. And that's it for today's Roundtable. We'll see you next time.